All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Crypto Mining Tools podcast. We have your host here, Scott Offord, and your co-host, Ethan Zerka.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
And
today, our special guest, JP Baric.
Hey, guys.
Welcome to the show. Yeah, so today we have a really exciting episode, and JP has been in the mining space for a while, longer than I am. I'm like maybe twice his age, but he's been in mining longer than me. How old are you, JP?
I am 22.
Wow, that is crazy. And you are like creating this empire of your own already.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work over the past really 5 years of mining and kind of figuring out where I wanted to end up in the space and what I want to work on. It's really interesting to talk to people that are in traditional real estate and realize just how easy it is to access bank liquidity, how easy it is to access that type of capital. When it comes to miners, it's something that I've never been able to experience in my life. And it's been an interesting thing just to kind of see, in my opinion, that really the discrimination from the banks and from the financial institution for the mining community and mining world. As a young entrepreneur, this is my first rodeo, my first really big business going at it. And not being able to have those bankable assets has put a strain on just capital raising and made it a little bit challenging. But I think that's the part of the point of them doing it.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Yeah. So I mean, you've been dealing with lenders and all that almost your whole life. I think the first experience you had was when you were 13, and you had to beg your mom for some money to buy into this internet money.
Yeah, well, thankfully I had the money because I had a robotics camp that I was running. So nice. I just had to beg her for her identity and was like, Mom, you need to buy Bitcoin. I'll give you the money. Don't worry. And so that was, I think, an easier sell because it wasn't her money to lose. And she wasn't very concerned about like losing her identity because I don't know. The internet was a confusing thing in 2012 and 2013 for people just on their their desktops. So, but yeah, bought Bitcoin at Mt. Gox and then saw the writing on the wall that it was going to go down and took all of it off and then started the altcoin.
So you got out before the fiasco happened with Mt. Gox?
Yeah, in my opinion, it was pretty obvious that it was going to happen maybe even a year before. Like it was pretty like, okay, this company is not well run. There's going to have liquidity problems. There, once the hack happened, it was like, okay, is there really going to be enough coins to get out? Thankfully, I only had maybe 20 or 30 coins at the time on the site. So it wasn't like I was 1,000 holder and it was like a problem to withdraw my money. But yeah, definitely started self-custodying as fast as possible after kind of that hack. And then you had MintPal and Cryptsy and all these really old altcoin exchanges that would pop up and go down. MTX Now is another good one that was very popular back in 2013, 2014. So yeah, just really understanding that self-custody piece at an early age in the development.
Yeah. Without, maybe making an endorsement in your idea, I mean, just for the noobs out there, what would you recommend as an exchange for them to use? Because there are a lot of people now that I know of that I'm trying to help them, get coin and things like that. And, I know what I have a preference for, but I'm just curious, since you've been in it for so long, do you have a preference?
I do have a preference on exchanges. I used to be a big proponent of Gemini. Then their fees are just, way too high for anyone who's normally buying coin. And I actually recently just started using Tagomi. I really like their platform. It matches with all the other exchanges. It does a very good job. Like if you sell 3 or 4 Bitcoins, you're maybe going to pay a $100 fee. And in selling that, it'll match with OTC providers as well. It'll match with different exchanges and get you the best rate on your order. And it fills very quickly. I've seen that it's a very fast trading engine. So that's what I tell people to go to now. And it's in the US, institutional base, backed by some big VCs. So they're well backing, and I was one of their very first customers, and really enjoy the company and their software and really the support. It's great. Like wires are almost sometimes instantly, like all request a wire withdrawal, and it'll be in my bank the same day. And I'm like, at like an hour later, I'm like, how is that even possible?
What about I think it's called ACH transfers?
Yeah, those take longer. Usually like 3 to 5 days. I think they have those, but just for funds, I usually use the wire transfer method.
Okay.
But I like it because like you can withdraw the money at 9 a.m. and it'll be in your bank at 9:30. And it's like I've never seen a
yeah, that is very nice. That is very handy.
After you're done trading, you can sell and pay your power bill, basically.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I've never heard of that service before, but it's nice to hear that it is a U.S. based company.
Yeah, I mean, for people in the U.S., we like our U.S. financial protection, and it's hard for us to give that away, and even our data protection. And also, if you're not in the U.S., it's very hard to serve U.S. customers, especially with the fiat bridge there. So, usually I suggest that. And for people that are just like not very serious traders, I say Cash App. It's quick and easy to get Bitcoin. It's great at a bar to be able to, hey, you have Bitcoin? No, awesome. Well, here, buy $10. I'll bet you. I'll buy $10 too.
That's awesome.
So, and you said, let's just go back here. Brett was asking, what's the name of that exchange? And you said Tagomi.
Yep, Tagomi. Tagomi.
Yeah, I believe we've got it in the chat there. And now, do they have a lot of different coins there, or is it kind of like Coinbase where they've only got 10 or 12 coins? Like
they have, I would say at least 15 trading, like 15 coins with different trading pairs. So it's not 1,000 like Binance, but it is a decent amount.
Now, Binance is kind of overwhelming to me. I would not recommend that to a noob.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only reason I use Binance is to exchange between USDC and USDT when I'm paying a supplier maybe over in China, because they really like USDT, but it's really easy for me to go from like USD to BTC and whatever maybe on Coinbase, and then transfer that over to Binance to then exchange over to something else.
Yeah. I've never had a good way to do that, so now I need to make Binance.
Binance also really has really good fees. So if I'm going to do a large trade, I will tend to try to make it happen over in the Binance world and not in the Coinbase world. I mean, they all have their pluses and minuses, and so that's why I was just really curious, like in your experience, and you seem well researched. You've kind of been around since I guess the beginning. Like the people before you were like mathematicians and like nobody's even heard of anymore. So the OGs. Charlie Shrem and right. So I mean that's really awesome, and that's really awesome that you discovered it. I believe. How did you find out about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin? Like what convinced you as a young teenager? Like this is something I want to try. This is something I've got to do. Because most teenagers I know are just like I want to play my video games, or I want to listen to my music with the distorted auto tune and doing those weird things. So yeah,
snappers, I tell you.
Yeah. So for me, why did I get into this space, and what was like the intrigue? So when I was 13, 14 years old, I was coming in freshman year in high school, and we could bring our laptops to school, which was amazing. So no one would. I didn't pay attention in class. Really, most of my class didn't pay attention. It was an early college I went to. There was only 50 kids, all guys in this high school freshman year. So we're on our computers and kind of just playing around, and you're reading news articles and trying to always figure out what am I doing here. I got a lot of free time, and I ended up on this article about Bitcoin on TechCrunch. Found out that it looked really cool. I was like, this seems cool. Internet money, like why not? Why not money on the internet? Then went in the rabbit hole of learning what Bitcoin was and trying to get some, which I wasn't able to successfully do, but I was able to learn a lot. Learned about the Byzantine generals problem. Was reading Wikipedia about where money started, why we have money, what Bitcoin is, how read the white paper. Kind of went down that, and most people, as a lot of people say, the rabbit hole of Bitcoin. And over about 8 weeks, started learning more and more, and then finally got some on Mt. Gox. I think for me, why it resonated with me is because at a young age, I guess I identified as almost like a libertarian, and I really value like free speech and being able to hold a strong conviction of what I believe to be true. And I believe that money is backed by hard work, and that you need to put in time and thought and have debt or some instrument working for you to be able to really keep this cash worth something, this dollar in our pocket. And at a young age, I was trying to figure out why does this dollar we all say is worth $1 have real worth. And that kind of led me down, I mentioned that money path. And so I started understanding like how important, data and financial privacy was, how important Bitcoin's role is in the future when we have, really just massive amounts of inflation and printing of money, and the recent COVID-19 stimulus packages out to wazoo. And it's been a way to really protect myself from a monetary system that works for me instead of against me. And I feel like that's how I view Bitcoin. Is it's a system that has allowed me to travel the world at a young age. It's allowed me to live on the Bitcoins that I've owned. I've never had to work at like a 9-to-5 job that I didn't want to work, for money just directly. I was able to be, use my time to really educate myself about where the space was going and build in the space, which was something that I don't think would be possible without the kind of like economics and incentives that Bitcoin provides people that use it. And so my classmates, I tried to get them into Bitcoin. Eventually they all jumped in, and I would say not all of them, but maybe 10 of the 50.
I bet you the ones who didn't are just like, why didn't I listen to him?
Well, it's honestly, I wish that too, but after 8 years, 7 years of preaching Bitcoin, it still hasn't got that adoption. Even in my own family, I would ask the question. I was like, so who's using their stimulus money to buy Bitcoin? You understand, everyone in the US just got this money, that's going to be worth less because it just was printed. No one had to work for it. You didn't have to work for your money. You just got it for sitting on your couch. Yep. And it still hasn't clicked yet. There's still, why is Bitcoin valuable? I don't get it. So I'm hoping over the next 4 years, we'll really have a wake up of people, especially in my younger generation, that are starting to question, what type of money they're using and why they should care about Bitcoin.
Yeah,
I really hope that's true, JP. I absolutely hope that's true.
No, and that's really interesting that you say that. Talking about inflation. One of the things that I had in my mind was, okay, so the U.S. prints trillions of dollars, and then they decide to give a little portion of that to only people in the United States, right? Which, so what does that do to people that live in other countries that are depending on the fact that, the world is basically run off of this US dollar standard, that, they didn't get this extra money when it was printed, but everybody else in America did.
Yeah,
I did not get any stimulus. I'm putting it out there.
I haven't got my check either. It says on the IRS payment tool, like, we don't know who you are, basically. So
I'm
you guys are too libertarian, just like you, JP. Yeah. So.
But Scott, to your question, I think worldwide, when we're printing a lot of money, the U.S. is the leading force, and the dollar is the reserve currency of the world. We saw that with the flight, not into yen when there's COVID-19. Everyone wanted dollars. I was actually reading Pomp's newsletter this morning, and he was talking about Lebanon and how the price there is falling of their currency. They're releasing restrictions. There's riots on the street. People can't buy milk. People can't buy food. So my guess is that scenario will occur in multiple countries over the next 4 years, similar to what it did in Argentina, Venezuela. Oil prices being what they are, they're struggling. There's these countries that have really nowhere to turn. And it'll be very interesting to see where the people turn to. I don't think the governments will turn to Bitcoin, but the people. That's where I hope that the resources and tools, the onboarding systems that we've been building, the fiat on ramps for the past 8 years as the industry's matured. I hope that's where the people turn. I hope they start to realize that until I get control of my money, I'm not going to have control of my freedom, of my life, my day-to-day tasks on what I'm doing, how I'm spending my time. Because if you don't have control of your financial freedom, you're almost like a hamster stuck in a cage, always trying to get that next dollar to pay that next bill. And a lot of us can feel like that at sometimes. And it's because we have these really big external pressures that are working against us inflation, interest rates, big macro forces of energy, really, that or make it hard for everyone to function in a society where if you're not up by the faucet per se, it's not easy.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting analogy. At the faucet, I know you guys as a company are working on some interesting things, and we could talk about that soon. But you did mention oil, and I guess what I was learning this week is that really everything comes down to oil, like the entire world.
Energy.
Yeah, energy, but definitely like oil, it makes the world run. Everybody needs it. And so what are you?
Like with the oil conversation, it is eye-opening to understand how much the world is run and backed by energy and oil. And I didn't realize that until we ended up hiring a consultant who helps build these power plants. And this was about a year ago. And we realized how this whole space is built, how energy companies build these massive billion-dollar projects, how they're funded, who's exactly putting up the capital for them, who's buying the power, and understanding this whole economics of the energy system, and understanding that energy, the industry, is usually the biggest industry in most countries. It's not banking, it's not tech, it's energy, because we all need power. We all run day to day on electricity, and it fuels our life. What's going to happen though is it's going to be a long time, but over the next 10, 20, 30 years, we're really moving from currency backed by oil, like the US dollar, to currency backed by electrons, like Bitcoin and other currencies that are using miners, which in my eyes is really the basic definition of work: putting electricity, creating heat. Really, it's creating energy and using it. So being able to provably create energy at a cheap price and use that energy is kind of really important for Bitcoin. And why Bitcoin has value and has maintained its value is because we're really questioning, what is money backed by? Should it be backed by oil? Should it be backed by gold? Or should it be backed by electrons, which are free to, anyone can make one. And as long as you understand how to make energy, and that price will keep coming down, and on the cost to create energy and the cost to consume it as well. With these Bitcoin miners, they'll get more efficient and the system will continue to run. So I'm excited for what how that shift happens and when that occurs.
So you know a lot about mining and the mining space. I imagine you've been doing it for quite some time. Can you tell us how that began? So we know the story of like how you got your first Bitcoin. When did you say, hey, I can buy these machines and I don't have to go to exchange anymore. I can actually use these machines to mine my own coin?
Yeah, so it was shortly after the whole Bitcoin, kind of the whole purchase of the Bitcoins for me. I was a tech nerd in high school, and I loved building computers. I loved working with graphics cards and understanding how to make money from computers. So I was selling them on Craigslist and basically buying computers, like buying parts, putting them together. And selling.
So were you were building like mining rigs and you were selling them?
Yeah, well, yeah,
that's awesome.
Started off without mining rigs. It was more just like normal computers, and then eventually we got to mining rigs, and I was building them, running them in my basement out of like a shoebox. It's like kind of like the shoe crate type of style where you'd put like 5 graphics cards across, have a motherboard. I had 2 rigs in my basement. I had to run some new power down there. And then eventually it got big enough where I built a shed in the backyard. And then we moved to a facility.
What was your mom thinking about all this? Like, oh, there's JP with those damn computers again. And,
honestly, I think my parents were just they were supportive. They didn't really understand where it was going, but they were supportive. They were like, he's not asking us to pay these bills. He's paying the power bill, for his miners. He's making this digital currency. Like,
he's not going to jail. He's not smoking dope. He's not murdering people.
He should be out there getting high with his friends. What's he doing in that shed spending all that electricity on?
I know.
Oh man.
But yeah, it was I went down that route of just building miners and selling them. And that's kind of how the early days of MiningStore started. We did $1 million in revenue in I think 2 months in 2017 in my basement.
Wow.
It was like, wow. Okay, maybe I should look at dropping out of school then.
Yeah.
That's wild.
That is wild, man.
Let's talk about that in 1 second here. But first, Ethan, why don't you tell us how we're able to actually keep this podcast running? And
yes, I want to give a big shout out to Brains OS. For those of you who don't know, our miners come with a firmware that is from the factory. And just like your iPhone can be jailbroken, that firmware can be replaced with a better operating system. This operating system will open up the performance of your miner and allow you to see metrics and aspects of the miner that the factory firmware doesn't let you do. And there are 2 different versions. One is completely open source, and then the other, I believe, is an enterprise version. And the enterprise version of Brains OS gives you even greater control. And this is really good for large mining farms who have a lot of hash rate. And it allows you to clock down your miners to make them more efficient when the price and value of Bitcoin is low. So you're getting the most amount of Bitcoin for the least amount of energy. And when the price of Bitcoin parabolics up and skyrockets, it allows you to turn on the juice with your miners and get the maximum hash rate out of them so you can get the maximum coin. So yeah, do yourselves a favor, go and unlock your miners. If you're not doing this, you are not mining properly.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks to BrainsOS for sponsoring our podcast, and we're just very excited to be able to share their product with you guys and their service. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about firmware on this podcast with JP, yes. Just because he has an interesting situation where he's actually testing out new firmware himself. There's other firmware like this guy Vanish provides. But BrainOS, they definitely have a great ecosystem, and then they also have their slush pool as well, where I can't remember if you already mentioned this or not.
I didn't. I was going to let you mention it, but yes, if you use BrainsOS and you also use slush pool, which they're a part of, you will get 50% lower mining fees. Yeah. And this is a huge thing, because not only are you getting the benefit that the firmware gives you, but you're also getting a reduction in, your pool fees. Yeah. So it's a win-win both ways.
Yeah. And so that's on their plus version. So that's the corporate version.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's get back here.
So JP, obviously you're very well versed in this industry. You've been around since the beginning, and I just have to, tip my hat to you for being 22 and being so far ahead of the curve. I mean, most people your age are just now getting out of school, and even if they don't have a PhD, they still have a PhD. They have a pretty huge debt of student loans that they have to pay back. And, you've just, you've cut your own path. You've forged your own way. And your knowledge is just impeccable about our financial system and awareness about that. I think that's one thing that schools should really teach us more about is, what is money and how does it operate in an economy? Because most people just think, it's a dollar. I have a dollar, I spend a dollar, and that's all it is. It's just, addition and subtraction. It has no concept. It has no understanding beyond that. But it really is, money is one thing, equity is another thing, assets are another thing, and people just don't know about all the different varieties of value that exist. And you seem to know a lot about that, and that's just amazing. So, tell us about your operations now. Tell us about, what you're doing to maximize your returns.
Yeah, so right now we have 2 mining sites that are currently operational. One is in New York, and it's just a mining container. And then another one is in Iowa. And that site has a building on it and 2 mining containers. It's about 5.4 megawatts total.
Wow.
And capacity. And yeah, we have a bunch of Avalon machines running there and a lot of S9s. It's been a journey really building out a site in Iowa. Container sites are fairly easy to deploy. There's not much project planning infrastructure there. You're connecting, switchgear and sometimes just a transformer to your container box and deploying it over a couple of days. But building out a building was a challenge. It's definitely was an interesting way to approach mining facilities. We were having some issues just getting the containers fully deployed on time. And so we decided, hey, we need to go ahead and move forward with a larger infrastructure play, something that can be set up faster than containers. And we got the building set up very quickly. But the actual filling out of the building, the electrical PDUs work, the wiring there, and installing the switchgear, kind of the shelves and fan deployment, and then actually putting the miners in the shelves, really up to kind of racking and stacking the miners. It was took a lot of time, partially because I was not on the site. We had other employees out here that were technicians. We had some help from local people here in Iowa, that kind of brought us to Iowa and brought us the contracts with the power companies. And they wanted to do a lot more, I guess, involvement in the project that we were expecting. So there was some project management issues there, getting the site up and running fully, but it was a great learning experience, and we're happy we're able to now take everything we learned and scale it to future sites. Right now on the site we have, like I mentioned, a lot of S9s running. Previously, kind of going into the Brains OS thing, we were running ASIC Seer, which I've been using for about, I would say we've been using it for about 6 months, actually 4 months on the software, for that ASIC Seer software. And then recently, because of actually my podcast appearance, we were asked to
this podcast appearance
today. Yes, we were asked to basically remove that software from the miners because we were not hashing at their appropriate rate according to ASIC Seer, and it was not high enough hash rate per watts per terahash. The machines weren't all running. Of course, these are machines that have been running for 4 years now, have been in the ecosystem for a long time. And also they're not our highest priority. As you mentioned, we are working on things that are, trying to change this fundamental beliefs of money and the core system. So we had to move off of that operating system. We were basically forced to either to make a decision, either come on the podcast or don't. If you come on the podcast, we're going to kick you off this. All your miners will stop working. And if you don't go on the podcast, well, we'll give you a discount on your fees. And that really didn't sit well for me, especially as I mentioned earlier, owning my data.
let me get this straight. This podcast that we're talking about right now, was being held over your head as like extortion to like if you go on this podcast, you will lose business with us, basically.
Yeah, basically, and not only lose business, but I will have to spend my time resolving the issue. And what I kind of said was like, I don't appreciate you questioning my calendar. Like, this is just coming in and saying, hey, you can't get in this meeting. Like, you can't have this meeting with this person unless we're going to cut you off completely. And that was hard because for my relationship with ASIC Series, I was one of the first users of FOS, which was the software before. I had a 300 GPU mining facility back in, when they launched in 2016 with Ethereum. And so to see that, like, hey, I can't even use your software anymore, you just have to be kind of like ripped out, was very hard for me, as I mentioned, because I like, data privacy. I like my own software. So I'm glad the community was able to help out, though. Scott, was great. He was able to help motivate some people and just let them know about the story. And then they came and they were able to help upgrade some of the machines to newer software. Of course, they're not going to be running until the end, after the halving, 15 days from now. But, they need to make that money for the next 15 days, especially for majority of the miners are ourselves. But we have a small, about maybe 5%, 10% of those machines running for customers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing your story about that. Just a little bit of background. The reason for this, the reason why he received that threat was because I had said something negative about ASIC Seer that the owner of ASIC Seer felt was not true. And I had an inkling that.
Is it really negative, though, Scott? Is it really negative if you are just literally like reporting information that someone else has told you?
Right. Yeah. So I had reiterated something that somebody had told me about ASIC Seer, and that got the owner pretty upset. And it's kind of started this little battle. So now, as of yesterday, April 27th, on their website, they have this disclaimer saying, kind of like a terms of service saying, if you associate with certain types of people, if you are a scammer, or if you run a Ponzi scheme, whatever, all these different guidelines saying that if we feel that we don't want to work with you anymore, we're going to not work with you. And the interesting thing is, okay, they have some protections built in. One of them being that they're technically not cutting you off themselves, right? So they say that they are going to stop accepting your fees. So they're going to stop taking their cut from the dev fee that's on those machines. And because they're going to refuse taking your money, that's going to activate some sort of a kill switch or
that will stop your hashing.
Right. So to me, I don't know, that just brings up this really interesting concept that I don't know if a lot of miners are thinking about. Being that, yeah, I think JP, you said it earlier. Not your firmware, not your miners, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it just kind of brings up this whole new thing that we have to think about. So if we're going to be installing third-party software, what are some of these kind of concerns that we have to be looking at?
Yeah, absolutely, JP. I mean, you brought in the whole fact that, Bitcoin was it was emotionless. It took out the human equation, right? So should we now welcome back in a human equation into an industry that's trying to free us from that?
Wow, that's big. I mean, I think with mining, at the end of the day, it's I mean, every business has that human equation, but with mining, it can be potentially removed. Like there's a lot of things that can be done with machines, and really, at the end of the day, the way I view mining is just as an interest tool and a great debt-based investment. So I do. It is hard though when you have miners running software and you're trusting the developer, they're providing you a good service. But then something like, in my opinion, a political debate, this debate that's happening. And I actually, it was funny because I saw the debate. I saw Scott's comments earlier in a private group chat regarding firmware and regarding this. And I specifically told myself, I do not want to get involved with this. I don't have time for this. And the next thing you know, a week later, I have like emails and stuff. I'm like, oh, this is great. I love it. Like the universe knew I had to be in this. So I was not, yeah.
Yeah. So that it's an interesting concept. You have these ASIC mining manufacturers that have their firmware, and when you buy the miner, it comes with this firmware on it, and you just connect it to the pool, and you can start making Bitcoin, right? And each of these miners might have a slightly different version of that firmware on their ASICs. But a lot of them are based on, well, most of them, or maybe not all of them, except for brains, are built on CG miner. Okay, so yeah, you have these different things. A year ago or so, there was the concern about ant bleed, where Bitmain potentially could, if they wanted to, they could shut off all the miners in the world or select miners that are mining. Which brought up the question, well, what if the Chinese government is involved with Bitmain? What if China wanted to kind of take over the cryptocurrency and cause a problem? China could force Bitmain to do something like that, or Bitmain could just choose to do it kind of underhandedly without anybody realizing what's happening. And that just kind of brought up the whole question to me about firmware and about open source and about mining, and how easily or how difficult it might be to prevent somebody from doing this. Whether it's a government stepping in and saying, hey, maybe United States doesn't like Venezuela making money on Bitcoin, so let's figure out some way to restrict them from being able to mine, right? So yeah, I don't know, JP, what are your thoughts on that whole concept?
Well, as you mentioned, it did come into the public eye about a year ago with ASIC Boost and overt ASIC Boost and all that. I think it's hard, and we've seen that software on devices, manufacturers giving, even Samsung saying, okay, we're only going to do 4 years of phone upgrades, and government saying you need to do 8 or you need to do 6, and now we have devices all over the world that are useless. And in crypto miners, it's 4 years, basically 4 to 5 years until those machines are done. So what is the manufacturer's responsibility? Not only to repair the machines, as we saw with Bitmain recently, just said, hey, all these old models we're no longer repairing. Put your service tickets in by 10 days from now, basically. So we're seeing that obviously the manufacturer has to ensure the product is maintained and supported. Even for us, we get calls for our GPU mining systems we sold in 2017. People will ask for support on those, and my technicians now don't work on GPU machines, so they don't have the type of feedback, but they send them the guide we put together back then, and that's about as much support as we can offer. It's a lot from a manufacturing standpoint to offer support on the software, fixing vulnerabilities that come up, throughout the years, and then in addition, the hardware and maintaining that and trying to provide support and replacement parts for that. So for me, I think that we have to really, I think last year we realized that they're integral parts of the ecosystem, the software and the miners themselves, and they need to be separate. Before they were joint, Everyone, people didn't really think about it much.
Mhm.
Now we've separated those, and I hope that manufacturers start to open source their software. I mean, Canon has mentioned it multiple times that it will happen. I have a bunch of their Avalon machines, so let me know when they do, because I'd love to work, getting good monitoring tools for them. The systems they have in place are not the best for managing large mines. But what we're seeing is that these tools are being kind of built for the community, built to provide value to the end user.
Yeah, absolutely.
And are being maintained well by the community. And I think that's a great opportunity for a lot of developers in the space, because one thing people don't realize is that miners are always making money. You might be losing money at the end of the day, but miners are always producing revenue. When that miner is plugged in, it's always making money. Therefore, there's always a fee for a developer to take some of that and to basically build good software for the space, which is lacking still. We're still
that's interesting, yeah, because when the developer takes their developer fee, yeah, they don't have to sell that immediately to pay for their electricity bill. So if they wanted to, they could maybe scale up or down their development speed and maybe save it for another time where maybe they want to cash it in 2 months from now instead of right now while Bitcoin is low. So yeah, that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, it definitely is. And the management of crypto is one of the hardest things to do well as a miner. Risk management is what I've been focused on a lot, with the understanding of crypto, understanding of Bitcoin, and then kind of understanding of DeFi. And now, how do you produce long-term purchase contracts of hash rate? Really, I think that's the question that I'm asking myself on a daily basis, and the question that is, quickly becoming a real need in this space and a real gap to fill. Kind of as I mentioned earlier, the whole financing of miners is very difficult because of the stability of the industry. Even though, in my opinion, Bitcoin mining has the opportunity and potentially is the best debt-based investment, the most stable debt-based investment out there for infrastructure, for institutions to come into.
JP, this has been a fascinating and enlightening conversation, and I wish it could go on and on and on forever and ever, because I'm sure we have so many things that we haven't even really touched yet. We haven't touched what your future thoughts are, going to happen on the halvening. What do you see 4 years out? We haven't, so many other things that we could talk about, so many different other paths we can go. But I would like to now ask you, how can people in our audience reach out to you if they want to continue the conversation? What's a good way that they can contact you and get in touch?
Yeah, for me, I used to have a Twitter. It was at JP Baric. No longer have that Twitter. I'm trying to get it back. I don't know what happened to it. So the best way to contact me is probably we have an email newsletter that go on MiningStore.com. Submit the contact us form there, and that'll get you on the newsletter. And the sales list. If you're an investor, an institutional investor, just let us know, and we'll put you on a different list where we send out high-level, energy-level related podcasts. And I'll actually send Scott something to put in the show notes that has like a direct sign-up for those newsletters, so it'd be easier for people. But that's the best way to keep in touch with me. If you want, you can follow me on Instagram at JP Baric, Telegram at MiningStore. So yeah, I appreciate it.
All right, that is awesome. That is fantastic. And I'm glad you're a part of our industry, because one of these days I'm going to need to retire, and I can hand the reins over to you.
Yeah, there we go. Awesome. Yeah. Well, JP, thanks for coming on and telling us your story. Yeah, I think we should have you on maybe again in the near future, and we could talk, more about economics and the mining community and just some of your other projects that you're working on outside of USA as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about all this.
very, very interesting stuff that MiningStore is doing these days.
And the only person I've actually met that was a miner when they were a miner.
Thanks.
There you go. Yeah.
You stole my line.
Yeah. Mining since he was a miner.
Right.
All right, JP. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks a lot.
Talk to you guys again.
Right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.